This month's real go-to-market advice is all about building community. Community is such a big buzzword right now. Everyone's talking about community-led growth and what it means for SaaS companies. And so we brought on 3 experts to talk about community today and how they've built their communities at their various companies. So that's my short little spiel. I'm actually going to turn it over to Alexa, who's going to be the moderator for this panel today. Alexa.
Thank you, Sandy. I am pumped to have you all here today. I will do quick introductions and then I'll pass it over to you all for lots of questions we've prepared. And for other folks in the community room or panel audience, whatever you want to call it, feel free to just unmute, raise your hand, ask questions as we go. I always love real-time questions as well. So we'll start with Anna. Anna is the Director of Community and Data at DBT, where she tends to the community of over 25,000 members. And prior to that, she was the first analytics engineering team at GitHub. And today she writes about the intersection of modern data tools and open source in the Analytics Engineering Roundup. Really cool. And we have Nisha, who I had the pleasure of working with Monte Carlo previously, where she was the head of marketing and on the founding team. And now she's the director of community at Gong, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with on this call. She has grown this community now to 15,000 members and built awesome programs, frameworks across Microsoft and Salesforce and Facebook that are still used today. So definitely community and marketing expert. And then we have Lena, who's the head of community at Replit. Her goal is to empower all people to make their mark on the digital world. So outside of work, she's an artist, a cyclist, and a science fiction enthusiast. Well, I'd love to hand it over to all 3 of you to do a quick introduction to yourself, your role, and what drew you to community, and then we can start diving into our more specific topics. So Anna, maybe we can start.
Sure. I don't have a ton to add other than that lovely introduction. Thank you, Alexa, except to say that I'm based in the Bay Area. If anyone wants to say hi, if you're ever coming through here. And also the thing that drew me to community was I grew up in a really small town in the middle of kind of nowhere, Southeast Asia. And I've always sought out community as a way to meet more people and develop more connections that I didn't have before. And so working in community now is something that is really important to me because I want to create those same opportunities for others.
Awesome. Keep going.
I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I work at a company called Gong. Gong built the category of revenue intelligence. The way that Gong works is it like captures your customer interactions, and then Gong's AI analyzes that data and surfaces key moments and then delivers insights to you so you can understand like your deals and your team and your market and all of that. This was like basically that sort of visibility was like previously unlocked, and with Gong you can actually unlock the performance and market data, you basically understanding in a more deep way your sort of customer interactions. And so I love Gong because it's a voice of the customer. At my previous company, we use Gong as well and actually leveraged a lot of their content and everything in terms of building sort of that category and category creation. So I was just very attracted to that company because of that. What drew me to community was I didn't know that I was into community. I was running a community meetup group for fun almost 15 years ago. And someone from Microsoft approached me and said, did you know that this could be a full-time job and we will pay you to do this? And I think from that, like the rest is sort of history. I've always infused community in everything I do. And I feel really lucky to be where I am in my career. And yeah, just really excited to actually learn more about Anne and Lena. They have such great experience.
Yeah, so my name is Lena again. I work at Replit. And if you're not familiar with Replit, it's a browser-based coding platform. And so you can build, share, collaborate live on coding and creative projects in just about any programming language you can think of. Our users run the gamut from teachers to hackers who are building maybe Discord bots or automating business workflows through Replit, making video games, you name it. We have a lot of different types of communities within our community. I was drawn to community because mean, I could go way back, but I'll go more recently. I worked in education and events programming in museums and the arts actually for a number of years before entering into tech. And so I've always used interpersonal experiences as kind of opportunities for learning, for having fun, or now for all of these other business purposes. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourself. So the first place I want to start is a lot of people will say, I want to create a community. So I'm going to create a Slack channel, or I'm going to create a Discord. It feels like sometimes we conflate building a community with the actual tool that we're using to build the community. And it's kind of tough to describe what a community even is, because there's so many different types, and even all three of your communities are really, really different. And so I'd love to start a little philosophical and say, what is the definition of a community? And it's such a broad term. So what does it mean to your companies, and what does your community even look like? And maybe we can go in the same order as last time.
Sure. Thanks for the really great question. The way that I think about community is about a sense of shared identity between folks. And that's something that's really important for the DBT community. DBT is a tool that enables data folks to collaborate with each other. And the way that it does that is through empowering folks to work in new ways. And so when you think about a community that's built around a new way of working, it can be extremely important for folks to feel like they have someone in a community that they can identify with, that looks like them, that is solving some of the same problems, that is using some of the same tools. And so to me, that is the heart of a lot of the things that we do.
And what tool do you use for your community?
We are multi-platform. We're kind of everywhere.
I love it.
Yeah, I would say, like, very similarly, community is just about bringing together people who share a similar interest. I think I would say that there's two, like, in a very broad general sense, there's two types of communities. There's sort of like the top of the funnel community. If you're looking to build a category, trying to get some, overall understanding of market, trying to figure out if there's like a product market fit. I feel like there's a top of funnel community that you can kind of build out. I would say that I was probably really lucky that there was already a community for Gong before I even joined and actually built a formal community. And I think that was because of all of the work that folks at Gong had done to build a category, creating amazing content, doing AMAs, webinars, just activities and things like this. And so more of the bottom of the funnel community, which is what I'm focused on in our B2B SaaS company, is really around customers. So it's more customer centric and focusing folks that are really active and are really excited. We call them raving fans, getting them connected with each other so they can learn and share sort of best practices as it relates to our product, and also, of course, other things with each other. So that's sort of how I'm focusing up my community. I report into our head of customer success. I'm in our customer success division. And the tool that we built our community on is Incited.
I don't have too much to add here. I will say, to me, community is a network where people can connect with one another in authentic ways. And those ways in which they connect help to scale the things that your team is already doing in a business. It scales the value of your product or your company. I know that's not quite as warm and fuzzy, but it actually is once you experience it. And in terms of tools, I find it's best not to be too prescriptive. You'll probably hear me say that a million times today. If people are already finding what they need on Discord or on Reddit, then that's where your community can be, and you can help and leverage and grow communities in those spaces. So we're all over the place. We also have our own kind of social feature on Replit. And so it exists there, but it's really all over the place so that people can get what they need.
I love that. There's a core theme of meeting the community where they are. It's less about the actual tool. It's more about unifying brains and bringing like-minded people together and helping each other learn versus like, we're going to pick this tool and build off of it. Really cool. And one thing I want to dive a little deeper on, Anna, which I know you've talked about before, is there could be different types of communities. And you mentioned a community of brand versus a community of practice. Can you enlighten us a little more about that?
Sure. I tend to think of communities as falling into one of three buckets: community of contribution. That tends to be open source projects, folks who are contributing code or documentation or something like that. So there's like a direct involvement from the users of a particular tool. There are communities of brand where folks align around being really excited about not just a particular product, but what the brand represents. I really like to use the example of Rothy's all the time. I'm a huge Rothy's fan. All the women on the call probably know what I'm talking about. Rothy's are a shoe brand. But as soon as I say the name Rothy's, lots of folks start nodding. It's something that really speaks to a certain problem that women have with shoes. And so, exactly. And brand communities can be really strong if you develop an identity around that brand. Exactly. They're washable. They are eco-friendly. They're made out of plastic bottles, right? Like they're insanely comfortable. And so there's a huge fan base around this. They're more than just shoes. So that's a really great example of like building a community around a brand. And people like things happen where folks hang out and just like get into an elevator and look down and they're like, oh, you're wearing Rothy's, and you start a conversation. Like it's like that. And then the last is a community of practice. And that's a lot of what DBT is. A community of practice is when folks are helping each other to develop in their careers or in things that they're working on. And often a community can be a combination of those things. We tend to lean more towards a community of practice. And so folks in the DBT community, for example, identify as analytics engineers. There's a certain word that they use to describe themselves, to distinguish themselves from other folks in data teams, and kind of develop a sense of shared identity. That way, folks share tips, tricks, share job opportunities, how they transform their teams and change how they work. So those are kind of the three main buckets that I tend to think about. And I'm curious how other folks on the call see their communities.
I love that. And also very curious if maybe Lena, then Nisha, you want to say how you see your community and whether it fits those three buckets.
I mean, Replit is such a dynamic product. Like people use it to create, they use it for business, to share, to teach, to learn. And some people just really love our CEO, Amjad, and our co-founder, Haya. And so they just want to stay up to date on what they're doing. And so I think there's like there's a lot of things that draw people in. And I think that I would put those into sub-communities, right? And I think we'll talk later about how our teams are built and how we address those sub-communities. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say build your own community cocktail. I mean, I think you can have different buckets. Like brand, product, and practice is really great. I think it depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, or our CEO always says sort of follow the music. So what it is that the people that are in your community are actually looking to achieve. You might have a lot of brand and a little bit of product and a ton of practice. The model that I ascribe to is called SPACES. SPACES stands for support, product acquisition, content engagement, and success. So my community basically delivers some value to each of those different aspects of our business. So for support, like thinking about support case deflection, again, like we're more of the bottom of the funnel community, which is more customer focused. So I think about that. I also take a look at from a product lens. Are we getting product feature requests? Are we making sure that we're actually sending those to our product team so that those are feature requests that actually turn into something? The acquisition piece of it is around like, are people joining the community and then becoming customers because they're getting value in the community? I'm able to sort of see that entire flow. I think that's really cool. And then from a content perspective, that authentic content that is written and shared by people that love your product. I think that really makes a really great community, getting that sort of engagement and those discussions going. And then I'm in the success org because ultimately my job is to really think about how do we scale our customer success and customer success resources. And that ultimately impacts all of our go-to-market strategy. So I often think about the community as like another like customer success manager, and what is it that I can deliver in the community that if like someone in CS like didn't exist anymore and they needed to learn everything that they could about Gong, could I just hand them the community and they could get it done? So that's how I think about it. I'll share a link to the SPACES model if folks aren't familiar with it, but it's really helped me and define how I think about community. Somebody already put it in there. Wow, I didn't even see that. It's perfect.
Amazing group. We're already ahead of you. We're just thinking 3 steps ahead. Something that's really interesting is that you sit in customer success. What teams do you roll up to, Lena and Anna?
I worked with, I mean, it's a startup, so it's always changing. I've worked under BizOps, growth, product, definitely success, community, customer success. It is all of it. I think Nisha is like absolutely right that with this spaces model, you know, your community is scaling the things you're doing as a company. And so you're scaling your community support by connecting people to more experienced users. You're scaling the feedback and the user interview and research stuff by having these relationships with users. All of that is happening. And so I do work with everyone and I pull everyone into community as much as I can. And maybe whether they like it or not, but usually they like it. And I've also worked across many teams. So it's incredibly varied. And I think it's also pretty new is what we're learning. Yeah.
I want to just echo what Lena said and say that for us, it's also a very, very, very cross-functional initiative. And at DBT Labs, the person who heads up community, right now that's me, has a seat at the leadership table to be in all of those cross-functional conversations, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's also really important is when you are building a community, making sure that you have, you know, a seat at the table. It needs to sit in some sort of leadership capacity. I've often believed that there should sort of be its own entity, like a friend of mine who actually runs the Trailblazer community. She always says, I really want to create like an office of community, the way that we have like an office at Salesforce, there was an office of equality, because it really just spans across all of the different functions of your business. And if you're doing it right, you are impacting marketing, you are impacting sales, you are impacting customer success, developers, product, I mean, everything, every single group. And so, you know, the more opportunity that you have to sit, you know, on a leadership team that will really help you get visibility and drive an agenda and a really strong cross-functional agenda.
Super interesting. I love all of those answers, and it's fascinating how cross-functional it is. I've heard community being thought of as product and growth and marketing and CS, and it just shows how cross-functional it is. So for companies earlier in their community growth strategy, and maybe, Lena, this is a good one for you because I know you're maybe the earliest stage company in this group. What is your advice for getting to your first 100 and then first 1,000 members of your community? And what does building that V1 look like?
Gosh, I mean, I can't take credit for those first 100 or 1,000 members of the community. I came to Replit when it was already buzzing with activity. And a lot of it was community-led growth, which, you know, you kind of get when you have a collaborative product that's built for sharing. And but I think my advice, if you're not there yet, is see who's already active. There are some key types of users who can really fuel adoption quickly. So an example would be for us teachers. With any teacher who is joining Replit, they might be bringing on their class as well. And there are certain teachers who are also bringing on all of the teachers in their school district. And then all of their students then learn to program on Replit and then just stick with Replit because they love it and they are familiar with it. And so finding those kinds of like those really pivotal users it can be really important. And then I also will just I'll go on every social media platform and just type in Replit or type in the name of our product or something similar and just see what conversations are already happening around it. And it's really flattering when people are talking about your company away from your company without you even knowing it. And so if I see a lot of conversations happening in those spaces, I'll see what I can do to enable them and engage them even more. Whether that means sending them swag or just being pulling them into a beta and saying you seem to have really great insights for this type of community or user. Do you want to give us the pleasure of learning from you? And so we try to give them various platforms to reward it. And because we see, then they like continue to grow and advocate. If you're not seeing anything, seed some behavior yourself and get your team to do it too. Start conversations online, see what conversations are sticking, and then use that data and grow accordingly.
A question similar to that is maybe, should you even start a community? I get so many messages now from early stage founders or early stage go-to-market leaders of, I want to start a community. And sometimes I'm like, why? What is the community that you want to start? And I have a strong thesis on this, but before, I would like to maybe throw it over to Nisha to learn, how do you know if you should start a community?
Yeah, I mean, like we would never build a product if there wasn't product market fit. So we would never build a community if there wasn't community market fit. And I think that's like the big thing that all community leaders and sort of agree on, right? Is like, is there an appetite for this? And the best way to do that is to do discovery, go out and talk to the primary persona that would be in their community, understand, hey, like, is there an appetite for this? What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to achieve? And if there isn't a place already, and I think that was sort of what we had a conversation about earlier, is are there already communities that exist that you can be a part of, that you can actually help continue to grow and further the message? Or if there isn't a place that doesn't exist, are you creating a whole new category of jobs? And there are a whole bunch of people that are IT professionals, but are also in security and also in ops, and you're creating a whole new job, then you absolutely have to, feel free to, and I always say, start small. So I wouldn't just put a whole bunch of people in a Slack group. Even with the best brands in the whole world, you can do that and nothing will happen. You will get chirps. You have to dedicate someone to that. And so really what I would say is start small, focus on impact, focus on the persona. I think this was sort of Craig's question earlier, but is focus on the group that you think that would get the most out of the community and a small group of people, and start having roundtables, smaller discussions. We actually did this really well when I was head of marketing at Monte Carlo. Is people that understood and believed in data observability we would plan these like little events before we even called them cabs, and we would just get people together and we would just talk about data and data reliability and how people had issues and what they were doing about it. And I think once you start that, then you can slowly build out your community, and then you can figure out people and systems and tools and all of that fun stuff to support it. But community market fit.
I love that. And this goes quickly. I want to follow up with Chris's question around, do you suggest focusing on one persona or role or audience, or try to be all things for all people?
Focus. Ship it. Like, just figure out if you have a hypothesis, build the community for that particular group. If you feel like that doesn't make sense and you're not sort of getting that traction, then you can shift. That's okay. Feel free to experiment. But if you try to do everything for everyone, you'll make no one happy. But if you try to be something really special to some people, you'll definitely make at least some people happy. And you can use that model. You can replicate that model across the board.
Awesome. So many good learnings there.
Thanks. She's just like nodding her head and is getting really, I love to hear what you think.
The way that I've always thought about how to get started is don't focus on building a community, but focus on creating value for folks that are important to you, and the rest will come. And I think that's it's just a summary of a lot of the things that Nisha has already said about it. Necessitates some focus. You have to figure out who you're creating value for. You have to really understand the humans that are important to you and why they're important, and the kinds of things that they need from you.
Totally. I very much so agree with that logic. And this actually gets me to a next question, Anna, that I'd be curious to start with you is, so community is all about adding value, right? Like, let's bring really passionate, smart people together that are tackling similar challenges. Let's figure out how to add value to them. So then something that we think a lot about in our product-led sales community is, how do you then track success? And I never want to track, the easiest way to track it would be, let's see how many people are in our community. But I don't like correlating success with numbers like the number of people in our community versus that value add to the community. And I know there was another question around, do you tie community metrics to ARR? And then if you do that, does that then get away from the actual value of you want to add value with the community? It's not just supposed to be a conversion to revenue. So I'm curious how you think about measuring success of DBT's community.
Totally. I'd also be really curious to hear how Nisha and Lena both think about this. The way that I think about this is one of two things. First, it's sometimes hard to quantify value. And so it's important to talk to folks. It's important to get that qualitative feedback that is really hard to put a number on, and tell those stories over and over again, share them with the company, share them with the rest of the community. So that's number one. Number two, if you do want to quantify something, the way that we think about this is taking a look at where folks are in the life cycle of the community. Communities are not static properties. People don't just join a community and stay there forever. Folks start out on the periphery. I tend to think about it as like concentric circles. So folks kind of start out further out in your orbit, and then they move closer to the core of what you're doing as you engage more with them, as you create more value. So you can indirectly see that you're creating value if you see folks engaging more and more with you and engaging more and more with each other. And so we have various ways of measuring that. And the thing that we focus on is not any given number in a particular bucket, but are we seeing people move through that process? Are we seeing people get closer to that center?
Super interesting. Lena, do you have any differences on how you track success?
Yeah. So I would say like my KPIs are tied to like spaces. And then there's also, I think there's actually different levels of the way that you can think about metrics. There's how am I supporting like the overall business? And then underneath that is like community health. Like, is my community in a good shape that it can actually make those like have that broader business impact, which, for most of us is, it could be like API acquisition or ARR, NDR influence. So that's definitely how I think about it. From like a spaces perspective, an example for like support would be case deflection. Product is like number of product ideas. Acquisition is like the number of new customers. So I'm actually tracking if people go to the community, spend time in the community, and then actually end up registering as a community member and becoming a customer. That's really interesting to me because I can actually see the ARR influence, the quantity and the quality of user generated content. There's a lot of like with community, it's a little difficult because there's a lot of correlation and causation metrics, but I try to tie as deeply as I can strong correlation metrics to churn reduction and churn retention. So what I like to see is, are active members in the community? And I have really like strict parameters around what it means to be an active community person, but do they have a higher likelihood of buying Gong again or upselling? That's how I can see versus someone that isn't in the community. So I'm sort of able to do sort of that A/B test there. So that's kind of how I think about it from that level. And then just from a community health, like I think number of discussions that people are having every day, one-on-one connections that are being made, active users, have they logged for us? Have they logged in the last 60 days? Have they like taken an action within that time period? I think that's really important.
I just want to say, yeah, I love how Nisha you're talking about, like there's like the company goals and then there's like community goals, which are maybe a subset, but there's sometimes a compromise. And so what I think a big piece of advice is like start with your goals so that when you're a month later, 2 months later, you can say, do we meet them or not? And do we need to adjust? Like keep the feedback loop really tight. And I think someone in the chat asked about this, but we will track engagement on our social platforms, and we also track engagement on Replit itself and see how those things correlate. And it's actually really cool what we found, like and I'm sorry, there's construction across the street if you're hearing banging. But we'll find that like a user who is collaborating on a REPL, which is a coding project, they're collaborating with someone on it, they're much more likely to keep using Replit over time to retain. And existing users who write and read comments on published REPLs are also more likely to retain. And so these are very real like social behaviors that you can drive through your work in community, either by promoting pro-social behaviors through incentives or promoting specific users who do these types of things. And then that can then drive engagement and retention on the product itself.
We're getting a lot of questions about what tools you use to actually track the health of community and track all these metrics and things that we just went through. I'm curious if you all are just using internal tools or any external tools as well.
Yeah, I shared in chat, but we're a sales company. So all of our sellers and everyone, we all use Salesforce. And so when I picked Incited, we made sure that had strong integrations with Salesforce. So I'm actually able to build dashboards in Salesforce.
Do you use any other tools?
We use Common Room to help manage the community internally. And for us, it's really helpful because we exist on multiple platforms. And so it's important for us to have something that connects to all of these different integrations and gives us a holistic overview of a community member across different platforms. Are you doing multiple things with us? Great.
Yeah, I've loved using Common Room. We also use Amplitude and I mean, we are Replit. We're a lot of software creators, so we also build a lot of our own tools to measure.
Awesome. Then there's one question about, for early stage startups, when do you think is the right time to double down on community? And maybe how does that differ based on business model or sector?
I would say the simplest way is like if you're already doing like a customer advisory board or you're getting folks together in AMAs or webinars and you're hearing appetite of people saying, oh, like, how do we all connect after the meetup? We all want to chat. We all want to get to know each other a little bit better. That's, I think, when you should sort of widen that lens. I mean, it's not like super quantitative. I can't say like, well, once you've hit like this many folks and, you know, this percentage of active users, but I think anecdotally, you'll hear a lot of that. And that's why our leadership team chose to invest in community, is like there was this appetite. And a few years ago, someone said, well, we'll just like set up a Slack channel and we'll put the 200 people that said that they wanted to be in a community in it, and they'll all just, you know, marry together and become BFFs. And when that didn't happen, they realized there needs to be a little bit more of an investment. And then I was hired from there. So I definitely think, you know, start small. And once you start hearing that there is, you know, more of an appetite to learn more, to gather, then just start creating opportunities and experiences both in person.
I'm scrolling through to make sure we get through every question from the chat. It looks like Randy had a question that I'm trying to find now around, I want to make sure we covered this. I'm curious if any of you actually tie community to ARR or any metrics along the customer pipeline or the customer journey. So conversion or anything that is tied to more sales facing metrics.
I mean, we certainly do. That was a big reason why I did want to open up it started out as a customer community. So I joined Gong last April. I launched a customer community in July. And we opened it up to the public in December. And part of that was I had this hypothesis that people want to interact and look at the community as a way to learn and understand around our category of revenue intelligence and just learn more. And, you know, our Google Analytics shows that people spend at least 2.5 minutes in the community. That's the average person. So I was able to track that there are people that are spending time in the community, then they end up registering and then becoming customers. So I do like to look at that flow. I think that's really, really important. Just especially if you have a lot of content at your company, having that in the community is really key. And so that people can actually have discussions about it in a meaningful way. So having content without that feedback loop, I think is definitely a missed opportunity. And I think community can really help with that.
Awesome. I love that. Anna, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a counter example. In our case, we explicitly don't tie community to ARR, and that's a feature of the community itself and the product. So dbt is both an open source tool with really strong adoption on the open source side, and there's also a cloud product. And so it's important that we don't prioritize one of those groups over the other when we're thinking about community efforts. Everyone is a part of the community, whether or not they're using the tool yet. They're part of the community if they are interested in or are using analytics engineering best practices and some of the viewpoints and practices that the community of practice shares. So for us, it's imperative that we don't, but it really varies. And there are some good arguments for and against, depending on what your community looks like, to Nisha's point earlier.
It's really interesting. Some bigger takeaway that I took from all of this is that all three of you have a very similar view of high level what is community. It's bringing people together. It's making people feel like they have this network of others similar to them that they can lean on and ask questions, and it's the ability to add value. But then how you actually operationalize each of your three communities is very, very different. The tools, the how you measure success, yes, build your own community cocktail, which has been fascinating to me. It's just, there's not one right answer. There's no playbook. There's no, here, copy and paste what I did at this company to go build your community, because it's really overarching goal is add value and connect, and then everything else is different. And I know we only have 2 minutes, so I want to ask each of you if you could leave everyone with one piece of advice on community building, knowing that there's no playbook, but if it was just one piece of advice, what would that be? Whoever wants to start.
I would say think of it as a relationship that is very long term. Like, community isn't just something that you do for a quarter or two. It's something that you make a commitment to over the long term. So if you think you don't have time right now, then maybe it's not the right time for you.
Results follow intention. So have a very clear and very specific intention about what your community is and what it will achieve. So going back to build your own community cocktail. And once you kind of figure out a framework that works for you, just experiment and try, and you will be very pleased with yourself with what you find you're able to do. So good intentions, good results.
Be ready to listen and learn. Your community is defined, and your community is built and defined, powered by community members. So pay close attention to what they're doing, what they're asking for. That's that compromise, I think. Like, you have your business goals, and then you have your community needs, and then where can you meet in the middle to make sure that those relationships are really healthy?
I love it. All three of you have said very similar things around listening to customers as well as being willing to experiment. So I'll add that to lean into what the community wants. It does feel like that, both in terms of the value that you add, the tools that you pick, the places they live. It's listening to them and following them and following the music and committing. Well, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I feel like I learned a ton for the purposes of our community building, and I'm seeing a lot of the entire time head nodding from everyone else. So this was fantastic. I really appreciate all of your time, and I appreciate the communities you're all building. I mean, I've been in the DBT community now for a while, and I've admired it. And Nisha, I'm following you and learning more about you. And Lena, I also have met your CEO, and he's phenomenal. So I got hooked to the community that way. So it's been really, really cool to get to listen to all of you, and really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
We appreciate you, and we love the POCUS team. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you so much. Way to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you,
I
Alexa.
also love that it's a panel of all 4 women. I'll just say that. This is awesome.
Always love it. Makes me so happy.
Thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
All righty.
Talk to you soon.
Have a great day, everyone. Chat soon. Bye.